Back in 1883, little John was just about 3 years old when his family moved to the Satsop area, which is located about 20 miles from Aberdeen, Washington. His parents, Louise and Daniel Frederick Tornow, were German immigrants and exceptional farmers. Little John had 2 older brothers and a big sister. It wasn't long after that until his little brother Edward was born. Little John was a curious child, always wanting to help out around the farm. He learned so much from his father. He was taught about farming, fishing, hunting, and became a very skilled woodsman, in which he would use later in life. When John was just about 10 years of age, he contracted the black measles, and he almost lost his life. As a result of the black measles, he had developed a lisp, which made him very insecure. This is where his problems started. After John recovered from the measles, he kept to himself, and when the Tornows had visitors, he would disappear into the barn or out into the woods. There were times that he would go out into the woods for days at a time. At the age of 13, John wanted to help out the family, so he got his first job for a logging company in the Wynoochee area. As the years went on, John's older brothers moved away, and his older sister Minnie married Harvey Bauer and stayed in the area with their daughter Mary and twin sons William and John Bauer. John also moved away, but he stayed close and always returned to the farm to help his parents with the planting and harvesting. His younger brother Edward was the complete opposite of John, and he was very lazy. John was very close to his sister Minnie and her twin sons William and John. He would visit them as often as he could. When John visited Minnie and her twin sons, he would always come bringing her fish or deer meat, and he would do whatever he could to help out. He would spend many hours with the twins. He would teach them how to hunt and how to fish in the woods, and just how to take care of themselves out there. It wasn't until 1909 when John's life took a tragic turn. His father, Daniel Frederick Tornow, had passed away. Not long after that, Louise, John's mother, breaks her hip. She wasn't able to get around, so she needed a lot of help. So 24-year-old Edward has his niece Mary, who was Minnie's daughter, move into the house to help with the caring of Louise. Not long after that, Mary discovers that she is pregnant and asks Edward to take her to the doctor. She goes to the doctor and loses the baby in his office. 2 days later, she dies, and the doctor was sent to prison, which is another story in itself. Just before Mary's death, in November, Louise Tornow passed away, and the family finds out that all 400 acres of their parents' land was left to their brother John. John's oldest brother and Edward were not happy about this, and they were determined to get their share of the land. About a month later, John comes back to the homestead and finds out that Ed had shot his dog. He was really upset, so he picks up his rifle and shoots Ed's dog. Then he turns to Ed and says, "I am going to the woods. Don't anyone come after me, or I will kill them." After that incident, Ed figured that he could have John declared insane, and the land would go back to him and his brothers, because an insane person could not own land. So Ed went to the sheriff's office to fill out a warrant. Then the sheriff went to the woods to find John and served the warrant papers to him. He spent a few hours talking to John. Then the sheriff returns to Edward and tells him that John is not insane, that he just wants to be left alone and live his life in the woods. 1 month later, Henry Bowers, who is Minnie's husband, asked his twin sons, William and John, to go out into the woods and hunt a bear that has been killing the cows on his farm. It was a Sunday afternoon, September 3rd, 1911. The boys went out hunting and they did not come back. The next day, a search party went out looking for them and found their bodies. What happened was the boys were at the bottom of the ridge and they were shooting at the bear halfway up the other ridge. But what they didn't know is that their Uncle John had a camp at the top of the ridge where the bear was. Shot at the bear. They missed, and the bullet went up into John's camp. John, thinking someone was trying to kill him, grabs his gun, fires back, and kills them both. John loved those boys. I don't think he realized that he was shooting at them. After that, John moved deeper into the woods, and there was a posse formed to find the twins. Their bodies were found, and the parents had been notified. Before continuing, I would just like to thank my husband Ron for working on the paintings that you are seeing in this video. We are not monetized and make no money on these videos, so I really appreciate all the extra time Ron has put in to help out. Someday we might be monetized, but we really need people to subscribe to our channel first. Now back to our story. In the meantime, the sheriff was studying the crime scene, trying to construct what had happened. He found one of John's camps with 2 bullets from the twins' guns lodged in a cedar tree. He also found the bear that had been shot and concluded it was John Tornow who shot the boys without considering anybody else. So this began the 1 year and 7 month manhunt for John Tornow. There were many posses sent out looking for John, but no one found a trace of him. So in 1912, the sheriff got Avery Elmer, a game warden, and Colin McKenzie, a bounty hunter. They were sent out to hunt John down. Now John, being very proficient in the woods, he always knew if someone was coming because he had set up his very own alert system using frogs. There are many frogs in the woods and they're very loud, but if anyone comes close to them, they will stop croaking. And this would let John know if someone was close. Also, John had helped himself to the newspapers that were on the porches of people's homes, so he knew when posses were sent out after him. In the meantime, Avery Elmer and Colin McKenzie were getting closer to John's camp. They knew they were close, so they had their guns drawn and they were ready. Then the frogs went quiet. And then A.V. Elmer and Colin McKenzie both ended up dead. Their bodies were found later, buried in the shape of a T. Throughout the cold winter of 1912, more and more posses were sent out to look for John, but he was seen by nobody. It wasn't until April of 1913 that Sheriff Shell Matthews, when traveling on a train to Tacoma, received information from another passenger on John's whereabouts. As soon as Sheriff Matthews gets off the train, he finds a phone and calls Deputy Quimby. He tells him to go get Charles Lathrop and Lewis Blair, both elite trackers, and go track John down. So Deputy Quimby locates the trackers, and they all headed out to the Wynoochee area. The trackers were familiar with the Wynoochee area, and they believed that they knew where John's camp was. The three of them were getting closer, and they spotted John's camp at a distance. Blair and Lathrop decided they were going to go in first and surprise him. Deputy Quimby, on the other hand, had other ideas, so he told him that he would hang back. But John, who had been alerted by his frogs, was waiting for them. He let them come into camp, and then he shot them. When Deputy Quimby, who was hanging back in the woods, saw Tornow gun down and kill the other two members of his team, he started firing shots at John. This took John by surprise. All in all, Quimby fired a total of 7 shots at John, and then there was silence. Quimby, not sure if he had shot and killed John, and didn't want to be killed himself, took off running for town. He finds Sheriff Shell Matthews and tells him, "I think we got him." The next day, they go back to the shootout site with a posse. Sheriff Matthews was the first one on the scene. He finds John dead and yells out to the rest of the men, "It's over. It's finally over." And everybody cheered and celebrated. But this wasn't the end of the story. They packed John's body down to Montesano, stopping a few times to take pictures of the corpse. When they finally arrived at Montesano, there was over 1,000 people there that came from Grace Harbor and Mason County to see the body of the man that they believed had been terrorizing their area. John's body was laid to rest at Grove Cemetery with the rest of his family. So the question is, did he really do these things he was accused of? Or was he set up? Like the men being buried in the shape of a T for Tornow, and the twins whom he had loved so much. And who would have had something to gain by John's death? The evidence was not followed completely through, and only a trial could have given us the answers. John Tornow, friend or foe, we will never know.